My family moved to a small town to get away from all the bad you find in a big city. And in a lot of ways, Tomahawk, Wisconsin was the ideal place. But evil lurks everywhere. And it turns out, my town was no different. I thought I could escape before it was too late. But someone was hiding in the darkness, just waiting to pull me into it. Forever. Growing up in the middle of nowhere, you'll do almost anything for fun. Even if it means getting into a little trouble along the way.
Rochelle was kind of a feisty person. She was very outgoing. She was little, but she could hold her own. Rochelle was not a goody two-shoes. She had a lot of friends that weren't good for her life, and after high school, she had a lot of rough patches.
I fell in with what you might call the wrong crowd, because it seemed like the only crowd in town. I really didn't know any different until a little angel came into my life.
Rochelle was 23 years old when Isabel come along. That was a turning point in her life, and she realized then that she really had to buckle down.
She decided she wanted to go back to school and get a better job and be able to support herself and her daughter. She was looking to move on with her life and move away from Tomahawk.
Second chances are hard to come by, and I planned to make the most of mine, even if it meant working at a job I didn't like too much.
She was working at the gas station, part-time, closing at night. She had a lot of responsibility there, but she was tired of working the night shift and not being able to be with Isabel.
Easter weekend, she came and said, "Dad, I don't really want to go to work." And we sat down and talked about it. She decided, I got to do this because I got Isabel to support.
I figured if I paid my dues, someday I'd move on to the kind of life I always dreamed of. But some dreams never come true.
It was the night before Easter Sunday at about 11:15 p.m. Officer was on patrol, and as he drove past the gas station, he observed Rochelle's car. Normally, that station closed up by around 9 o'clock at night, so it caused him to turn around and can see what was going on.
All those night shift officers knew me, and knew I should have been long gone by then.
As he got out of the car, he went to the front door that opened into the gas station, and there was nobody inside. As he rounded the corner of the building, he observed a female lying unresponsive, face down on the sidewalk with a significant amount of blood around her body. I knew Rochelle quite well, and it was very obvious right away that Rochelle had fought her attacker quite hard. Around Rochelle's body, there were broken pieces of a knife. The bathroom door had blood splatter and smears on it, and the bathroom itself was just blood everywhere.
When it came to a fight, I was always taught to give as good as I got. But sometimes you need a little help. And while I didn't get any, fortunately those investigators did.
We're a small community, and this doesn't happen here. We have 7 sworn officers that comprise the department. We have to make certain that we're doing everything possible to solve that crime.
As soon as Chief Johnson realized he had a homicide on his hands, he called the Department of Justice, and the Wisconsin State Crime Lab was mobilized. We went in and really examined the scene. We found all the money was gone from the cash register. The computer was taken, and we found out that cigarettes were missing from behind the cash register. We knew then that it was a robbery.
We found several prints, palm prints and fingerprints in that gas station. Our thought was if we can identify the person who those prints belong to, that's our prime suspect, without question.
Well, investigators were looking to tie someone to my murder. My family's whole world was about to be ripped apart.
We were woken by a knock on the door. It was a sheriff's department deputy and a chaplain. And they came into the house, and that's when the chaplain said, "Your daughter is deceased." There's no real words to explain. A part of my life was gone.
My reaction was, this can't be happening. Her daughter, she was going to have to go the rest of her life without her mother.
Isabel was the best thing me and my ex-boyfriend Jasper ever did together. And we tried to make things work. But I knew in my heart he was no good for me.
Jasper's somebody who has had his run-ins with the law over the years, and he obviously had the most reason to be at odds with her because they shared a child together. So he was somebody we wanted to talk to right away.
Jasper was one of those bad boys, the kind you couldn't help but love. But there's a thin line between bad and evil, and Jasper may have finally crossed it. When I fell in love for the first time, I knew there was a good chance I'd get my heart broken. But I dove in anyway, hoping the fall wouldn't be too hard.
Jasper and Rochelle were high school sweethearts. They always had their ups and downs, and eventually, when Isabel was a couple months old, they ended up splitting ways.
I didn't always like what Jasper did. He was a rebel, bad boy type of person.
The father of Rochelle's child did have a criminal record, mostly involved in the sale of illegal drugs. He didn't have any violent criminal history, but in affairs of the heart, all bets are off the table.
We sent an officer over to Jasper's apartment, but he wasn't there, and we weren't certain where he was at.
Jasper went wherever he wanted, whenever he wanted. But in a town as small as ours, nobody can hide for long.
In the very early morning hours, we received word from a sheriff's deputy that he'd actually stopped Jasper for speeding. During that first contact with Jasper, he stated he had been out of town at the time of the murder, several hours from Tomahawk. He stated he had received a phone call telling him something happened to Rochelle, and he immediately headed back.
Jasper's story seemed to make sense. Still, it was hard to tell if he was speeding into town or trying to make his getaway.
We were able to talk to relatives that he had been visiting who corroborated that they had been at their house, but we still did a print comparison, and his prints didn't match what we had in that bathroom. It was impossible he could have been involved.
Jasper would never touch a hair on my head. I knew he wanted the best for me. And for our daughter. Now everyone else knew it too.
I can't even imagine what he went through. It was just heartbreaking for him and all of us.
After we were able to eliminate Jasper as a potential suspect, we were talking to just person after person. And each of those persons we talked to, we did a print comparison. One of the people we interviewed was a teenager named Derek. He lived real close to the station, and from his apartment room, he can see the gas station. He stated that he had been home that night in his apartment, that he heard what he thought was some sort of a disturbance. And when he looked out, he saw some young men in some sort of an argument, and they were in a tan four-door sedan.
Most of my customers were real friendly, but every once in a while, someone would come through the door that would give me the creeps.
DCI Special Agent Close. We did, in the course of our investigations, talk to a woman who identified a person that did drive a tan four-door car. The woman identified this person as Nathan Ives.
Nathan was one of those guys I knew on the wrong side of the law. The type I wanted to leave far behind.
The witness proceeded to tell us that shortly before Rochelle's murder, that Nathan Ives had a plan to commit a robbery of a gas station. And as part of that robbery, he had planned to use a knife. When we did a check on it, he had a very extensive criminal background. We determined Nathan Ives was somebody we needed to talk to.
When we got to Nathan Ives' house, he was not there. The tan car was in an open garage. We saw blood smudges on the exterior near the driver's door. In the interior, we saw blood. Nathan became our top person of interest at that time.
We needed to find Nathan, and he was nowhere to be found. But we did find Nathan's girlfriend, and she provided us information that Nathan was headed towards Milwaukee and was seeking to get to California. He was on the run.
I've been around enough to know there's a time to lay low and a time to run. And it looked like Nathan was in an all-out sprint. I never complained about the hand I was dealt in life, and I know I chose some of those cards myself. I was hoping my luck would change for the better, but it only changed for the worse.
It was almost a week after she was killed that we had the funeral for Rochelle. None of it seemed real to me at all.
It was everybody's daughter that was taken that day. It wasn't just my daughter. You know, she was part of the community, and when I seen the outpouring of people, it was just overwhelming.
After the funeral, we were watching the news, and we had heard they were looking for Nathan Ives to question him in Rochelle's death.
Once we determined we had his car and we had blood in the car, and knowing that Nathan was on the run, we put out a statewide alert that we wanted him located and picked up.
Sometimes your past has a way of catching up with you no matter how fast you run. And investigators knew Nathan had plenty of reasons to be running.
In trying to find Nathan, we learned real soon that he was going from family's house to family house towards Milwaukee.
We were tracking cell phone numbers to residences. We had officers from multiple jurisdictions sitting doing surveillance. We suspected he was running out of places to hide.
Nathan Ives did admit that he knew Rochelle and had heard of her homicide, but he stated he had nothing to do with it. We asked him while he was running, and he said he was running from a lifestyle and from a misdemeanor warrant. When we asked Nathan about the blood we found on the car, he said that it belonged to his girlfriend, who he said had cut herself on a broken vase.
Anyone could see that Nathan had someone's blood on his hands. But the question was, whose?
We subsequently learned that all the blood found on the car that Nathan Ives had been driving did belong to his girlfriend.
In addition, it didn't take long for us to confirm his alibi. He was still a really bad guy, but he clearly was not the bad guy in our case.
We were basically back at square one.
When I found out that Nathan Ives was cleared, I broke down. I was extremely terrified that I'd watch this 10 years down the road as an unsolved case.
Every day that goes by that we haven't identified this person, this is causing distress throughout our community.
Motherhood taught me to be patient, no matter how frustrating things got. But patience is much harder to practice when you're trying to catch a killer.
You know, a couple months had gone by in this investigation, and we just were at a standstill with what have we missed?
The two of us met regularly to compare notes on who we had left to talk to. At one of our meetings, Chief Johnson and I came across a name of a person who had been talked to early in the investigation.
Derek was the young man who lived in the neighborhood. His room overlooked the gas station. He could see it from his bedroom window. During our initial interview with Derek, he stated he had no problem giving us his fingerprints, but he thought he should talk to his dad first. He's a young guy, 18 years old. That was not an unusual request, and we granted it. But over the course of these 2 months, it hadn't happened. And at this point, it dawned on me that that was the only person that we hadn't gotten prints from.
I'd seen Derek in the store a few times, and he never seemed like he was playing with a full deck. Now investigators were wondering if he'd been hiding something up his sleeve all along. Sometimes life throws you one obstacle after another. But if you stay focused, one day you'll find yourself on the right track.
During the course of the investigation, I kind of kept a running task list of bits and pieces that I had to track down, and that's when Derek's name came back. One of the things that jumped out to me was the fact that we had not followed up with Derek Domke on his prints.
It can be easy to lose sight of the big picture when you're faced with so many little details. But a lot of times, it's those details that matter the most.
Special Agent Kust and I went over to Derek's residence. I said, Derek, you got to make a decision here. Either you are willingly going to give us your prints or you're not. And he looked at me and said, okay, let's go right now. He told us that he was glad to provide the prints to clear his name because they won't be in there. I believe getting the prints from Derek would be a simple get them, compare them, and we'd be wiping him off the slate.
If Derek was bluffing, he was bluffing something good. Question is, was he about to be called out on it?
Next morning, there was a phone call from the fingerprint expert at the crime lab. And the first words out of his mouth in my ear were, you got him. Absolute confirmation, no doubt, 100%. That's Derek Domke's prints in Rochelle's blood.
Derek sure acted like his hands were clean enough. But investigators knew his story was far from spotless.
We went to his house and I confronted him with the fact that we had his fingerprints and his palm print in Rochelle's blood at the gas station. His response was a repeated, they're not mine. Can't be. They're not mine. At that point, I told him he was under arrest for the murder of Rochelle Anderson. He was handcuffed and he was taken to jail.
Derek thought he was pretty smart, that he could keep quiet and his secret would be safe. But the evidence kept stacking up against him.
A search of Derek's apartment found 20-plus bags of garbage. And inside those garbage bags, we then found a cover from a computer tower that matched the same model and brand of computer that was stolen from the gas station. We found cigarettes that matched the brand and type of cigarettes stolen from the gas station. There's no explaining that away. He's our killer. It's that clear and simple.
Even in the face of the truth, Derek stopped short of owning up to my murder. But investigators could finally piece together what happened that terrible night.
The best we can put together with the evidence that we have, Derek was using drugs by his own admission and trying to fund that. He was desperate for money. He went over there to rob at that gas station. And there was a confrontation with Rochelle. And she didn't back down. I believe she put up a fight, and he reacted violently against her. He beat her brutally, and those knife wounds occurred after she was already beaten. After he killed Rochelle, he went back to his apartment, and then he proceeded to sit up there and watch and wait.
I got a phone call Randy, this is Chief Johnson. We've got the guy that did it this time. This is him. And there was no better words to hear.
I was working so hard to get away from people like Derek and make a better life for me and my daughter. Kinda strange. The type of guy I was running from most ended up stopping me in the end.
We've always told Isabel when she asks where her mother is that her mom's in heaven. So just out of the blue, she'll ask, Grandma, when is my mama gonna come back from heaven? But Rochelle can look down and smile at her beautiful daughter that is so much like her.
We don't get to choose how we're brought into this world, or even how we leave it. But the choices we make along the way shape who we are. My daughter is living proof of that. She's the best choice I ever made. My family moved to a small town to get away from all the bad you find in a big city. And in a lot of ways, Tomahawk, Wisconsin was the ideal place. But evil lurks everywhere. And it turns out, my town was no different. I thought I could escape before it was too late. But someone was hiding in the darkness, just waiting to pull me into it. Forever. Growing up in the middle of nowhere, you'll do almost anything for fun, even if it means getting into a little trouble along the way.
Rochelle was kind of a feisty person. She was very outgoing. She was little, but she could hold her own. Rochelle was not a goody two-shoes. She had a lot of friends that weren't good for her life, and after high school, she had a lot of rough patches.
I fell in with what you might call the wrong crowd, because it seemed like the only crowd in town. I really didn't know any different until a little angel came into my life.
Rochelle was 23 years old when Isabel come along. That was a turning point in her life, and she realized then that she really had to buckle down.
She decided she wanted to go back to school and get a better job and be able to support herself and her daughter. She was looking to move on with her life and move away from Tomahawk.
Second chances are hard to come by, and I planned to make the most of mine, even if it meant working at a job I didn't like too much.
She was working at the gas station, part-time, closing at night. She had a lot of responsibility there, but she was tired of working the night shift and not being able to be with Isabel.
Easter weekend, she came and said, Dad, I don't really want to go to work. And we sat down and talked about it. She decided, I got to do this because I got Isabel to support.
I figured if I paid my dues, someday I'd move on to the kind of life I always dreamed of. But some dreams never come true.
It was the night before Easter Sunday at about 11:15 p.m. Officer was on patrol, and as he drove past the gas station, he observed Rochelle's car. Normally, that station closed up by around 9 o'clock at night, so it caused him to turn around and can see what was going on.
All those night shift officers knew me, and knew I should have been long gone by then.
As he got out of the car, he went to the front door that opened into the gas station, and there was nobody